Good morning and welcome everyone to our last big public debate before Christmas in the Wilfried Martens Center for European Studies, which is, as you know, the think tank of the European People's Party. Our topic today is the recent agreement on the EU budget and the recovery fund and the implications for future EU decision-making. Now, we were all happy about the agreement 2 weeks ago, but the cliffhanger, another one among so many cliffhangers, left a bitter aftertaste for many. And it certainly raises questions about the future EU decision-making, and that means the future of the EU. Our credibility is at stake, vis-à-vis our own citizens, vis-à-vis the world, and last but not least, vis-à-vis the financial markets. So can we continue with the unanimity principle in the Council and therefore vetoes or veto threats? Or can we devise other methods, maybe introduce more qualified majority voting? So in order to talk about these questions, we have two discussants today with us. There is the Portuguese member of the European Parliament, José Manuel Fernandes, the coordinator for the EPP in the Committee on Budgets, and also the chair of the delegation for relations with Brazil. Welcome. And there is Johannes Lindner, who is head of the EU Institutions and Fora Division, which coordinates the relations of the European Central Bank, so he's in the ECB in Frankfurt, which coordinates the relations of the ECB with the European Union institutions, in particular the Council and the European Parliament. So thank you both for being with us. Now, we will have a couple of rounds among the speakers, and then we'll open it up to questions from the public. And we'll finish at 11:45. So it's going to be a concise and short debate. So now, let me start with the first question to MEP Fernandes about last week's summit and the tensions and negotiations before. So looking back, has unity been restored in this deal, in this historic deal about the budget and the recovery fund? Which further political battles can we expect in the implementation process, especially concerning the recovery fund? What would be your commentary looking back at this groundbreaking event 2 weeks ago?
Hello, and hello everybody, and thanks for the invitation. The decision is a historic decision without precedent. We will use the guarantee of the budget, the headroom, to have a recovery fund where we have loans, 360 billion, and grants, 390 billion, and these grants will be paid, this debt, by the European budget. It is solidarity. But to the question if we have restored the divisions, if the divisions are finished, if we have restored the unanimity does not mean unity. But in the budget, in the decisions of the MFF, in these big files, we have all the time tensions. But at the end, we have a common position. But unfortunately, that's not finished the division between East and West, between South and North, between net contributors and beneficiaries. And we need to finish with this. All the member states are beneficiaries of the European Union. We cannot divide the countries, the frugals and the other. No, all the countries and all the citizens are beneficiaries of the European Union, and namely of the internal market. In the Council, we cannot have the 27 national agreements. Look the position of the Council. They take the recovery fund and the MFF, and 93% is for national envelopes. Where is the geopolitical Europe? Where is the programs where we need for the energy union, the digital union? Where is the program where we need to reinforce, like our Horizon research? Thanks to the European Union, we have increased the flagship programs. But these divisions in the Council are not finished. And the next steps. Now we need the ratification of the member states, the ratification of the own resources decision. And 22 countries need to have the ratification by the national parliaments. I hope that we will not have more obstacles. I hope that and we are in an emergency situation. We cannot have delays. And we have a delay in the Council. And what is not acceptable is the use of the unanimity in the Council to try to change a regulation where we need only, or we don't need the unanimity. I talk about the rule of law. That's a co-decision file. And that's not fair. And we cannot accept member states to use this unanimity to make chantage in other files. That's not impossible. And I hope that it will not happen in the national parliaments now. Last point: the own resources decision take in the past 1.52 years, and now we cannot have this delay. Because without this, without the ratification of the national parliaments, the Commission cannot go to the markets to take the 750 billion. And we need this money in the European economy. And it's not responsible, it's not fair, it's not correct, it's unacceptable, this delay.
Thank you very much. I think these were totally clear words. Blackmail cannot be accepted. And we'll later on discuss a little bit about options for the future. But I would now like to turn to Mr. Johannes Lindner from Frankfurt and ask him, okay, what are the macroeconomic implications of these groundbreaking decisions that the European Union took 2 weeks ago? And maybe let's also include the Green Deal, the European Green Deal, which also has enormous bearings on the way we deal with finance and economics in relation to climate change. So what would be your introductory statement about the macroeconomic and maybe also political consequences of all this?
Yeah, thank you very much, and best regards from Frankfurt to Brussels. It's a great pleasure to be here, and a very interesting topic that you've chosen. I want to make briefly just 3 messages, one on fiscal, one on monetary policy, and then forward-looking, also the hinting at the elements of Green Deal that you covered in your question. I mean, on the first, on fiscal, I think we have to pause momentarily and just also let it sink in now that we have an agreement, what an achievement the new next generation EU deal has been, and also look back at this year and just recognize how impressive the EU tackled European fiscal response, the pandemic. I mean, you have the Eurogroup safety net already in April with the ESM, with SURE, with the EIB plan. You had then the announcement of a next generation EU a plan, which of course is enormously innovative, as Mr. Fernandes has already said. I mean, it's within the community method, so led by the Commission. It is money from the capital markets taken for grants, and it's also money given to those that need it most. And it recognizes the fact that this is a symmetric shock that hits us all, but the ability to react to that symmetric shock is different. And the fiscal space of the different member states is different. And there is a sense that we are in the same boat, and therefore Europe has to support and has to help. And by giving that support, we will kind of master the pandemic together. So I think an impressive fiscal support that has been given, and also an ability to react that I think is impressive. That brings me to my second point, which is the interplay with monetary policy, because the fiscal response is important also because it helps us as ECB to have a effectiveness of the monetary policy decisions that is without that fiscal support would not have been possible. So, I mean, you know that the ECB early on has taken strong forceful measures. I mean, this includes the launch of the PEP, the Pandemic Emergency Purchase Program in March, which with an envelope that is now increased to 1.85 billion following the latest Governing Council meeting, and also the launch of the target, or the extension, I should say, of the targeted longer-term refinancing operations, which complement the PEP. And just to briefly illustrate with two quick examples on why the monetary policy impulse is more effective if it's complemented with a strong fiscal response. And that is one, if you look at the spreads which really reflect the refinancing possibilities of member state governments. And if you look at the charts, they went down twice. Once when the ECB in March made the announcement for PEP, and the second time when the Franco-German announcement came, which said we will have sizable grants for member states. And this second signal of trust and stability was enormously important. And the second point is the interplay with the banking sector. The so-called TLTROs, the targeted long-term refinancing operations, which we provide to banks, can only work if banks have a clear incentive to give credit. And with the guarantee programs of the member states, that incentive is of course much upped, because the guarantees will allow banks to do credits without much credit risks, and therefore pass on the money that we give to them. And then the final point on the issue of going forward, and how does it help to modernize the economies? Because I think there's the double objective of the RRF. It's recovery and resilience. And I think what is so important is that the fiscal impulse is used well to modernize the economies. And here, I think the plans of the Commission and also the discussion that are taking place with the Parliament now on the governance framework for the regulation of the RRF is important to make sure that member states have investment plans that address, and also reforms that address the vulnerabilities, national specific vulnerabilities, but also follow a horizontal approach. And here I think climate is really an opportunity, because you could use that money, and that's really the idea, for modernizing the economies. And it goes hand in hand with the sort of regulatory agenda that also Green Deal implies. And therefore I would say it's an opportunity to really make a step forward, both at the national side, but also the way climate is becoming a real EU priority.
Thank you, Johannes Lindner. I've got one follow-up question at this point, and that concerns this fear expressed by some of the frugals, and maybe also some people in Germany, the fear of sliding slowly into a so-called transfer union. In other words, to have like permanent liabilities of member states for each other. How would you answer those fears?
I think it's important to recognize these fears, but I think one should also take a step back and realize that the notion of transfer union in the context of the EU budget needs to be taken with a pinch of salt, because we always had a regional policy. We always had a convergence promise and objective within the EU budget. So the concept of helping member states to further converge and to support investment in member states in order to make that convergence possible is not so new. So in that respect, I think it is an element of what the EU budget stands for. Secondly, I would say is that, of course, it's a fundamental crisis that we are facing. So the concept of solidarity that Mr. Fernandes has mentioned is, of course, also driven by self-interest, because if member states take the right actions, then this will also help to overcome the recession, to overcome the pandemic. But what is very clear, and there I'm fully with these concerns, we need to have a governance that makes sure that the money is well used. Because it's also the success of NGU will be fundamental for any future debates about an increased budget. Because only if this money is well spent can we have a discussion on whether a similar kind of engagement or a stronger engagement of the EU budget should take place. So it is a litmus test on the effectivity of EU spending as well.
Yeah, thanks very much. José Manuel Fernandes. What is it with this governance? I mean, are we going to see more battles about the precise governance of the instruments of economic solidarity that we have now reinforced, that we always had, but which we have now greatly reinforced? So what is the next battle going to be about in the Council?
The next battle for me is the new own resources. Is an important battle, but about the unanimity, only to say that we cannot use the problem is not in the unanimity. The problem is in the use, the bad use of the unanimity, because you need the responsibility also. Unanimity implies responsibility. About the governance and the recovery resilience facility and the regulation, we are working now. I hope that maybe today we can have a political agreement in the regulation of the recovery and the resilience facility. But in the interinstitutional agreement that we have voted yesterday in the European Parliament, we have. It is binding, legally binding, and it's clear that the European Parliament is in each budgetary procedure involved in the amount that it's external excise revenue that's come to the budget and after that go to the national budget. And we are involved. We are involved ex ante. We are involved also ex post with the budgetary procedure. We have do another point. You know that with the Article 122 of the treaty, we have nothing to say to have a recovery fund or instruments like this. But for the future, we have an agreement with the Council that the Parliament will be involved since the beginning with the Council to have a common view when we will use this 122 article of the treaty. We have reinforced also the legitimacy of the recovery fund, but we have now this precedent for other instruments like the ESM or instruments like the recovery fund. What is the next challenge? I don't know if we have solidarity in the future with this recovery fund and the grants. I need to explain. If in the future we will maintain the level of the budget, 1%, and if this budget pay the debt, where is the solidarity? Now for the debt you have 21, 22 inside of the budget a line to the repayment, 12.9 billion, 0.01% of the budget, no problem. But after 2027, the payment of the debt will be 10% of the budget, 15 billion per year. If you maintain the level of the budget, you reduce the others funds and the others programs 10%. And in this case, where is the solidarity? Is the next budget that will pay what we have now? What we ask and what is the challenge? We want new own resources to be sufficient to the repayment of the debt. We need this basket. We have put this in a legal binding text, the interinstitutional agreement, and we have this agreement with the Council where we need a new basket of the new own resources that need to be sufficient to the repayment of the debt, with the objective, with the aim to not reduce the programs and the funds. The principle is simple. Don't pay, they need to pay. That's why we ask to the giants of the digital, they need to pay. The carbon border adjust mechanism is fair. We can have the TTF, the TTF is for the financial transaction tax, FTT. And
financial transaction tax.
Yes, thank you. We cannot burden the citizens. We need these new own resources without burden the citizens. And we cannot also cut the future. We cannot cut the next programs and the next funds. That's now. The big challenge in the Council next year is the roadmap that we have agreed also to the introduction of new own resources. It is very important. We have asked all the time new own resources, and it's clear that with these new own resources and with true own resources, we can avoid the juste retour. I want my money back. And now it's urgent to have these new own resources. Without the new own resources, I can say that we don't have solidarity, because you maintain the level of the budget, and is with this level that you will pay the debt. That means that you will cut funds and programs and after 2027.
Okay. Yeah, okay, thank you. So we have a picture of the upcoming battles in the Council in 2021. My question to you now is about the procedures and the veto and the possibility for blackmail. Is there any way we can now be smarter before we risk the next cliffhanger situation that costs us credibility internally and externally? What can we do now about making our decision making more effective and less, let's say, more resilient to blackmail?
I'm worried. I'm concerned about this. In the European Union, we have one leader, Angela Merkel, and the others are governments. This is a problem. We need leaders in the European Union.
Yeah, and she's leaving in 9 months.
And she is leaving, and it will be a problem, because without Angela Merkel, the decision of it was impossible to have the recovery fund. The Parliament have asked, but we can say thanks to Angela Merkel. The agreement to have interpretative declaration about the regulation of the rule of law, and this interpretative declaration doesn't change the regulation. That's clear. I think we can say thanks, Angela Merkel. But we need leaders. That's the problem. And we need where is Cameron? Where is Cameron? Remember, Cameron have asked to reduce the budget. And he presents the budget to the citizens like a big, bad issue. It's bad, the budget. The budget is not expenses. It's investment. 93% of the budget is for investment. But we have a lot of governance, they are not leaders, that say also we want to reduce the budget. We cannot. The budget is not bad. The budget is an important tool for the cohesion in the European Union, but also for the competitiveness. But now you have petty Camerons. You have small Camerons in the country. They play the same role, and is against the European Union, because you give the idea that the budget, the budget is only 1% of the GNI, and you give the idea that the budget is bad. What we need, we will not change the rule of the unanimity, because you need to change the treaties, and to change this, you don't have the possibility. We need to work with the unanimity, but unanimity need to be where we need to be. We need to have unanimity, but this implies responsibility, and we need to ask responsibility in the member states, in the governance, and I hope that we can have a new leaders.
Yes, I think leadership is a key buzzword here in this debate. So let me just briefly return to Johannes Lindner now. And Johannes, you have heard these calls for more democracy, for a higher role for the European Parliament now for decades. And my question to you is this: is there a trade-off between the efficiency of decision-making and the degree of democracy in the decision-making process? In other words, the more the parliament and maybe even national parliaments will have to say in all this, aren't we complicating the decision-making process on such vital questions of the European Union to such a degree that we become even less effective? Over to you.
Okay, I mean, this is a fascinating debate, but this is, of course, a debate that is very political. So as a central banker, I can give you a little bit more my personal perspective on that. Although, mind you, the fundamental difference and trade-offs between sort of the two sources of legitimacy, namely input legitimacy and output legitimacy, is sort of a trade-off, or is a sort of a concept. These are concepts that also central banks face. And the concept of input legitimacy is really that you allow parliaments, governments to provide, and citizens to provide the input, what they want, and gain the legitimacy because you're in line with that input. And the output legitimacy is a bit the effectiveness of that you deliver on what is expected. So these sources, two sources of legitimacy, I think are very important, and they complement each other. Now, on that particular question, I wanted to just echo a bit what Mr. Fernandez said about unanimity and the role of Parliament. We are commemorating the 10th anniversary of the death of Tommaso Padoa-Schioppa, who was one of the founding members of the European Central Bank's executive board, and also finance minister in Italy. And he died 10 years ago, and he was, for my generation of young central bankers, really a very formidable intellectual hero, so to say. And I remember 15 years ago, or over 15 years ago, asked, can you look into how to improve the budgetary procedure? And he was very much saying, look, we need to do QMB, and that brings higher effectiveness. But when you look into the procedure more closely, you see, of course, the unanimity for the MFF provides a conflict regulating framework for the annual process where you have QMV. And in fact, when we came back to him and say, look, it is more complex, you need to have the possibility of the veto players, because it provides, at least in these 7-year frameworks, also a possibility to have this input legitimacy. And of course, that shows to you a bit of trade-offs. But I think the solution, and a bit, again, echoing the pragmatism that Mr. Fernandez just also said, is, of course, that you recognize and align behind common challenges. Because citizens want that there is deliverance on these common challenges. And I mean, just two notions of what are common challenges. One is climate. And I think here, if you see at the survey data from the Eurobarometer, citizens want effective solutions on climate. And I think that should sort of focus minds and maybe do the transformation that Mr. Fernandez called for, turning lead or kind of creating leaders. But to this narrative of we cannot do that nationally. We need to do that together. And the second one is, of course, the foreign policy challenges. I mean, you see, the US election has brought a new president on board. You see the rivalry with China that the US has. We have a Brussels voice only if we are united. And I think that is regaining sovereignty when you are united, and the focus on purely national sovereignty has its clear limits.
Thank you. Very important remarks. Also the last sentence. Now, we have a question from the audience, and Bartłomiej Kot, who is a member of the Martin Center staff, has a question. It has been recently revealed that in Poland, for example, his home country, there is a high disproportion between the funds allocated by the government to regions with high support for the ruling party compared to those considered to be strongholds of the opposition. Now, in that respect, should the EU focus more on securing the merits-based spending within the recovery fund that would oppose this kind of financial gerrymandering, especially in the states with rule of law issues where this kind of favoritism has an impact on voters? So, we would have time for maybe one more brief question. So if you have any, please put it in the comments section. I would like to turn to José Manuel Fernandes with this question. What can we do about kind of regional favoritism by governments that have a problem with the rule of law anyway?
For the first time, we have the regulation for the rule of law. We need this regulation, unfortunately, because the rule of law is not an option; it's an obligation, and it's strange that we need this kind of regulation in the European Union. But we need. You know very well that we have the subsidiarity principle, and the money of the European of the cohesion policy is under share management, and the responsibility is the responsibility of the member state. That's not mean that we cannot, and we need to have a monitorization, and we have the regulation, common provisional regulation, and the regulation of the funds that the amounts are allocated for the region. They cannot be transferred or for other regions. We have this kind of limitations. But what is important now is for the partnership agreement, and we don't have power in this. That's a negotiation between the member state and the Commission. The Commission needs to be vigilant, because if the member states have operational program national and if they reduce the regional programs, they can after have flexibility that allow to put money in the regions that are they cannot need, but they are more close to the party and is not acceptable. It is very important the moment, and is in the next month, the negotiation between the member state and the European Commission. And this negotiation is the partnership agreement. And the Commission need to ensure that the European money and the money from the cohesion policy go to the regions and that need more. That means to the less developed regions.
Absolutely.
And we have this tool, and the Commission need to use this tool and need to apply the regulations that we have adopted.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Because we're running slowly out of time, I would like to come to Johannes Lindner with the last question. Hendrik Kaluwe is asking about the possibilities to create own resources that we've already discussed, the fact that the EU now needs own resources. And we have now, among the instruments in place, carbon border adjustment mechanism, digital levy, a new own resource based on the emissions trading system. So are there other possibilities that you see theoretically for the EU to create own resources? Very brief answer, please.
I think this is a very important debate. We don't, from our perspective, have a clear prescription. I think what is important are the two roles that this debate on taxation have. The roles of the financing, so to create own resources that is lasting for the financing side, and also the discussion around whether that is a true own resources or is just a sort of a juste retour national contribution in disguise. So that's the one dimension. And then the other dimension is, of course, the policy instrument that you want to create with the own resources, and there one, or with the tax coordination. And there one would need to be careful to see how much these two debates can be taken in combination or have to be seen more separate, because of course tax coordination, tax policies have a strong policy impact as well in reducing climate, in reducing emissions and directing a more climate neutral policy.
All right, thank you very much. One last chance, one sentence from you, José Manuel Fernandes, but one sentence really.
We have the roadmap is legally binding. ETS, that's clear that next year we have the tax for the plastic, but we have the carbon border adjustment mechanism, the financial transactional task, the digital levy. This is new one resources where the principle, they are aligned and with our policies, with the environment policies. The principle that the companies that benefit more from the internal market and they will not pay, they need to pay, and we cannot burden the citizens, and we can have, if we put these new resources at the European level, we can have success. If we put these new resources in a national level, they have not, we don't have success, we don't have the same effectiveness.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I mean, it's been an extremely dense debate and complex, as complex as the issues at hand. And let me just formulate, maybe selectively formulate the big takeaways coming back to this initial question of decision-making procedures in the Council. And let me first of all say that the pandemic has created an extraordinary situation, and we have begun to solve it together. And that's underlining the words together here. And the instruments and the resources that we have created here are not only to solve the immediate problems of the economic slump as a consequence of the crisis, they're going to make us resilient, fit for the future, if you want. The upcoming battles will concern the governance of these instruments, and some of the battles are just beginning, and they will mark the year 2021. And here's the decisive point about decision making. Unanimity is here to stay to the degree that we have it now, but we need to make up for the possibility of blackmail by political leadership. And that is the key word. In order to, and this is the last point, in order to preserve and strengthen unity that is direly needed for the European Union of the future to cope with our strategic challenges inside and outside vis-a-vis the rest of the world. So on that happy note, I would like to conclude here. Thank you very much, Johannes Lindler and José Manuel Fernandes, for being with us, for sharing your wisdom and your insight with us. And thank you all, last but not least, for watching, for actively participating. And this is our last event. So thank you for being so numerous in our events in 2020. And hopefully you will stay with us in 2021. So I wish you a very Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, better than this one, and stay safe. Thank you very much. Goodbye.